Thank you very much. Wow. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be back in Penn State. I haven't been here since I was in high school running in a track meet. But thank you very much for that very nice welcome. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to know that the revolution is alive and well in Pennsylvania. Hey! So we still believe in a choice, and we believe in a choice in the Republican primary, and you are going to have a choice in a couple of weeks or next week when we have this primary race. So I am very pleased that you're interested in the campaign, because indeed the country needs a choice, because by the far majority, the vast majority of the American people are telling us today we're on the wrong track, and we'd like to put America on the right track. And very simply, that means we don't need more government, we need a lot less government is what we need. We need the government out of our personal lives, out of our bedrooms, out of running the economy, and certainly out of the business of running the world. Very simply, that is a good way to solve our economic problems, our financial problems, and our dollar problems. People say, well, how can you do that? What would you have to do to get things turned around? Well, we could start by bringing our troops home. And that would mean that we are refusing to spread the war. There's no reason for us to go to war against Iran, and there are many in Washington right now who are planning that. No war against Iran. And when we bring our troops home from the Middle East, that's not all. It's time, since we can't afford it, and it doesn't give us any national security, it's time, you know, to come home from Korea. They've been in Korea since I was in high school. It's time to bring them home. And that means, let's end World War II. Let's come home from Europe and Japan. That's war's over. Let's come home and save not a few million, not a few billion, not just a small amount, hundreds of billions of dollars we could save. We're spending $1 trillion a year maintaining our empire. And we do know that empires don't come to an end because of military conflict. The Soviet system came crashing down, and we didn't have to fight the Soviets. They came crashing down because they couldn't afford it. Economic reasons bring empires down. And right now, that is what we're facing. We cannot afford this any longer. And you, in particular, particularly cannot, because you're inheriting this mess financially and also the obligation of serving and fighting these wars. So I would say that one generation never has the right to pass on a war to the next generation. It should be your say, not previous generation. Because we have made treaties in the past, that does not mean that we should automatically go to war. We shouldn't be going to war on treaties, we shouldn't be going to war on UN resolutions, and we shouldn't be going to war on the hearsay of an individual in the executive branch. War should only be fought when it's absolutely necessary, when the American people speak through their members of Congress and there's an actual declaration of war and no other time. It is under those circumstances that the people come together, realizing that we're under threat, and we fight and we win and we get it over with, and no prolonged political wars that we have been experiencing. You know, I've taken this very strong position on foreign policy. It's not my position. It's the American foreign policy. It's the policy of the Founding Fathers. It used to be the policy of a lot of Republicans, but they have short memories. You'd think they were supposed to have long memories, but not. But the one thing I've been very proud of in this campaign is in the last quarter last year when there were quite a few more in the campaign. And if you notice, there were 11 Republicans at one time. We're down to 2, so we're doing pretty well. But there was a report, a financial report that came out at the end of last year, and they added up the donations from active military personnel. And they added them, all of them up, all the Democrats and all the Republicans. And guess what? Our campaign got more money than all the rest put together from active military personnel. And they would like us to believe, which we do not, they want us to believe that if you support this position of non-intervention and not going to war carelessly, that you're un-American and you don't support the troops and you're not patriotic. I would say that we are the true patriots in this country and we don't go to war unnecessarily. Now, does that mean that we're isolationists? Absolutely not. Isolationism is where you have walls and barriers and no trade, no travel, and no friendship. And I would say you have all of that. The founders advised that. Trade policy, open trade, and let people travel, be friends with everybody. Does that mean that the countries that we deal with are perfect? No. Right now, there's a move on in Washington to badger and beat up on the Chinese, and they deserve plenty of criticism. But why should we be so presumptuous to condemn China for their infractions on civil liberties when we have a few problems right here at home violating our civil liberties? Now, the big talk now is, let's not participate in the Olympics. Let's not go to China. I say, don't take it out on the athletes. Let's use athletics as a good diplomatic tool. Don't send our troops and our guns and our weapons, but send our athletes over to be diplomats for America. But you know, it's been very encouraging this past year. The young people responded, and I think there's something going on somewhere. I think it's called the internet, and I didn't know a whole lot about that internet. I love computers and I like information, but I didn't know about the communications, and I've learned a whole lot. And people in Washington now come to me, other members of Congress, and they'll come and say, hey, teach me how to use the internet to get people to come to my rallies and raise a lot of money. I said, you're missing the whole point. I said, it's what you believe in that counts. It's not a technique. I didn't do it. So I hint, but they never catch on. One person was doing that the other day, and I was the lone vote up there, 1 against 434. And they were lecturing me about why I don't teach them how to raise money and raise more money because they're hurting. And I really wanted to be very blunt. I tried to imply there was a philosophy, but what I should have said and could have said is, you know, that's the reason people care, is because I'm up there all by myself trying to tell people that we don't have to be part of this mess up here, and you're not going to get anywhere if you just fit in and promote power and the same old things. This is why the Republicans have been routed, is because they didn't stand up for what they believe in or claim they believed in. But the really good part about talking about foreign policy, not only how important it is, there's so many benefits. First, we save a lot of money. We can't even fight this war unless we borrow money from the Chinese. You know, so we could save a lot of money, and there would be a tremendous economic benefit to helping, balance the budget and all. But just think of the millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars that we could save, that we would be safer. We're less safe because we're over there. This idea that we're over there because we're going to fight them over there and not here. But I'll tell you, they come here because we're over there in their face, occupying their country and telling them what to do. Every once in a while, people have trouble understanding that, but what they have to do is sort of see it. What would it be like if they did it to us? What would it be like if a country that had people that looked different than us? What if a Oriental country, like the Chinese, came over and they're stronger and they say, well, we have to protect our interests in the Gulf of Mexico, so we're going to occupy your land and we're going to have military bases and we want you to accept our political system and we want to give you our values and our religious values. Do you think we would resent that? I think what it would do, it would bring the American people together. All Republicans and all the Democrats and all the independents would come together and they would all believe in the Second Amendment. The really great part about the rallies we've held in these last year, a lot of enthusiasm, and I am absolutely convinced the Constitution and freedom brings people together. Brings people together that are diverse because there's no reason that we have to be challenging each other. We won't challenge other people's lifestyles, what they do with their money, and we allow people to be left alone. It's not the responsibility of the government to take care of us. It's up to us. But unfortunately, for the many, many decades now, we have had governments that want to tell us how to live and what to do with our money and tell the world what to do. But you know, if you believe in the right to life and the right to liberty, you have to believe in the right to keep the fruits of your labor, which means we can simplify the tax code. We get rid of the IRS and rid of the income tax. Now think about all that money we spend overseas. We bring that money home and our troops home, and all that money is spent. And you don't have to pay income taxes. Do you think this country would thrive? I mean, there would be such an economic boom, it would be unbelievable. And today, what is happening? People are realizing that this country is bankrupt. Young people, your age group, you're inheriting a mess and its financial burden. $60 trillion worth of entitlement obligations, and over a $9 trillion national debt. Right now, today, the announcement yesterday of the national debt going up in the last 6 months is the biggest in our history. It's going to be nearly, by the national debt this year may well go up $750 billion in 1 year by the end of this fiscal year. And that is a great burden, and it's falling on you. It is a threat to our economic freedoms and prosperity, but worst off, it's a threat to our freedoms. Because if we have to pay these bills off and we have an economic downturn, actually it's not all that bad if you have one thing. If you have your freedom, there will be no problem, and that should be our goal. The goal of all political action should be the preservation of individual liberty. Now, we have been blessed because we have lived in a very prosperous and a very free country. Far from perfect, but we were given a document that was designed to actually preserve and protect liberty, but lately it hasn't been doing a very good job. The Constitution, if you read it carefully, it does about one thing. It's not written in any way to restrain you. It's to restrain people who are, break the law and do violence. But most of the Constitution is there to restrain the government. That is what the Constitution is supposed to do. But now that it is recognized that this country is much poorer and that we need to do something about it, we need to, first off, the easiest place is to change our foreign policy, but people will tell us, don't do it. You're not going to be very patriotic if you bring these troops home. You won't be supporting the troops. But that's what they told us when I was in the military. I was in for 5 years in the 1960s when we were in Vietnam. I didn't go to Vietnam, but I was serving during that time, and it was always said, boy, we can't leave. We can't leave because if we do, there will be a domino effect, and communism will sweep Southeast Asia. Well, we did leave in a terrible way, terrible loss of life. We paid dearly in loss of life, but loss of finances. The 70s were devastating because we were paying for the guns and butter of the 60s. But you know, there was some tough times after the first year we left there, but gradually, instead of it becoming all communist, what has happened? The Chinese are better capitalists than we are. They're our bankers now. So what happened to Vietnam? What, did they go communist? No, they became westernized voluntarily. The French and the Americans were in Vietnam for 20 years. We lost so many lives, and so many Vietnamese died. And we were going to tell them how to be true westernized capitalists, and we were going to protect them against communism. And now they're westernized, they're capitalistic, we invest over there, they travel here, their president comes here. We achieved, or they achieved, and the world has achieved in peace what could not be achieved in war. And that is what we could expect. We can expect better things in the Middle East when we leave, because we will be leaving. The question is are we going to leave in a humiliated fashion, in a bankrupt fashion where the dollar is totally gone and we can't afford anything? Or are we going to leave, you know, strategically and say, look, we've done our best, few mistakes were made, but we're coming home, you're going to take over. We are now going to endorse the policy of self-determination. The country of Iraq is going to be turned over to the people of Iraq to determine what they do. But there is a way out. There's a way out. If you look at all the problems, whether they're financial, personal liberty, or foreign policy, we've gotten ourselves into this mess because we as a people have become careless. We have allowed the people to represent us in Washington who had very little respect for the rule of law and the Constitution. We need to do but one thing, and that is return to the strict adherence to the rule of law and to our Constitution. And that, of course, means that we would have a different monetary system. The founders of this country understood inflation. They understood what happened when you had the runaway inflation of the continental dollar, and that is why they were very clear in the Constitution. There would be no central bank, and only gold and silver would be legal tender. So when we finally realize that freedom has been restored in this country, guess what? There will be no Federal Reserve System at all. There will be no secretive bank printing money to bail out their buddies and bail out Wall Street. But the history of money is very clear, that when you destroy the value of money, which they've been doing for centuries, the destruction is of the middle class. The middle class is wiped out, wealth is transferred to the wealthy, and the middle class is wiped out, and the people who live in poverty, the poor, grow in numbers. And that is what we're witnessing today. And the people are way ahead of the statistics from Washington and the politicians in Washington. They're still wondering if there's going to be a recession. I mean, there's a housing crisis and there are bubbles bursting all over. There's inflation going on. The standard of living is going down, and they're still wondering, and we're living on totally borrowed money. You know, but we still do have prosperity. You go out and you walk, and there's still a lot of prosperity, but there's a big difference. There's a big difference today because the apparent prosperity that we have is all on borrowed money. And therefore, it's very, very fragile. The foreign policy is fragile. That could explode anytime. The bombs could drop on Iran soon, and which would double the price of oil overnight. And the protection of civil liberties, that is very fragile. The economy is very fragile. So we live in very, very dangerous time. And that is why there's an urgency here. A year ago or so, when I was asked to run, I said, no, I don't want to. I don't need to do this, and people aren't ready. There's nobody really cares. There's not enough people that remember what it was like, and I don't know how the young people would respond. I said, we need another generation of education, because I believe education is the key to it. You have to understand why you don't need the income tax and how you can be more prosperous. You have to understand why printing money is bad. And once you understand that, then the government will reflect those views. So I argued that there wasn't going to be a good response and not enough people. To my surprise, and I am pleasantly surprised, there were a lot more of you out there than I ever dreamed, and I thank you for it. But the fortunate thing is that you and others have been able to make an end run around the establishment. They thought all they had to do was marginalize everything that I said in the debates and marginalize me on the evening news, and nobody would get the message. They didn't even know there was an internet out there and how the internet message could be spread. So this is tremendous. Just think, we have had, I think, over 1,700 meetup groups form. And it was the meetup groups, the spontaneous supporters went and raised the money, and a significant amount of money. So there is we're able to compete now. And this is important because it's very necessary that things move along quickly. So whether it's educational, political activities, or getting involved, very, very important. And this is what is happening today. The follow-up has already occurred. We are told that this is being foolish, staying in the campaign because we've already picked our nominee, and what are you doing this for? And I said, well, as long as there are a few out there, as long as there are supporters, and as long as there's money in our bank, we will continue. So there are a lot of people involved in Pennsylvania. We're still going through the process, trying to be a delegate. There's a lot of people who have now filed for offices, and they've gotten involved in their local politics and in their precinct work. So this is all good. I don't even know all that's going on. You know, if it were run on a conventional campaign, you would have one person up here with raising a lot of money and go down and try to organize. This has been different. This has been different. The Grassroots has organized this campaign. This is a truly grassroots effort, and organization and fundraising is just fantastic. So your enthusiasm has been, you know, a real great help to keep me energized. I hope I helped you to be energized as well. But one thing that I have planned, and you may have read about it on the internet, that could help us keep the energy going. I've taken the thoughts that I've expressed here these past year, more or less in the platform, all the details, whether it's the monetary policy, the tax policy, the foreign policy, and personal liberties, and I put it into a small book. It's not a big book. It's called The Revolution, a Manifesto. And that's going to be coming out soon. It'll be out on the 30th, and we'd like to have a splash. We'd like to let the conventional media know that there's a lot of you who are interested. So if you're so inclined, it would be a vote for our campaign if you could participate in that, and that is available now on Amazon. So this will continue. Instead of anticipating when it will end today at the reception I had at Gettysburg, and this was very well received. I said, this is not the end, folks. This is just the beginning. One other issue I do want to touch on that young people respond to very favorably, and that is on personal liberties. And this is where we are indeed threatened. And this has been a very serious problem, especially since the 9/11, although it was occurring before that. After 9/11, very quickly, there was a bill that came to the floor, one which I strongly condemned and voted against, and that was called the Patriot Act. But the worst part about that, the Patriot Act appeared on the House floor, and it was really not available to be read, very long and very complex. But the worst part about it, most of the bill had been written a long time before 9/11. It was just sitting there waiting for the opportunity to be placed on the American people, which means more intrusions on your privacy. We should work very hard to try to preserve what the founders fought for, and that is for our Fourth Amendment, the privacy issue. The government is supposed to be there for a purpose of protecting your privacy, not to protect the secrecy of government. Government shouldn't be secret. But even before 9/11, our personal liberties had been under attack under the guise of the so-called war on drugs. The war on drugs has been designed, well, it's claimed to be to make you better people. It's just sort of like they had prohibition of alcohol once to make the people better. Well, that was a failure. the prohibition on drug usage is just as much of a failure. It's cost hundreds of billions of dollars. We now have people in prisons who have never committed a violent crime cluttering up our prisons while the rapists and murderers are getting out on easy sentences because we don't have enough room in our prison. We have turned the issue on its head because in some states, and the states do have the authority to regulate drugs and alcohol and whatever, but in states that have tried to overcome these onerous federal laws, have passed laws that said, in a very token way, sick people can use medical marijuana. But the federal government feels so obsessed and so threatened by the fact that somebody dying with cancer or AIDS might get benefit from marijuana. So this is a twofer. First, individuals ought to have the right of freedom of choice and the responsibility for those choices, and besides, the states have the authority under our Constitution, not the federal government. But the trends have not been good. And there was a supplemental bill in 2006 where rather secretly, there was a change in the Insurrection Act of 1807. The Insurrection Act tells you very specifically, in a very narrow sense, when a president can declare martial law, and of course, this is very, very rare. Well, this has been modified and made it very easy for a president to declare martial law. And it can be for health reasons, it could be for a terrorist attack, it can be for disorder, public order. So it's very, very vague, and it cancels out the additional protection that was placed in the Posse Comitatus Act in 1878. That has been essentially eliminated. So the stage has been set, and we've already seen this invasion of privacy, warrantless searches. We have seen the attack on our privacy on the internet. We see the national ID card. This country does not need a national ID card. And we have the FISA courts. They've been fighting tooth and nail in Washington over the FISA modification of the FISA Act. And what they're saying, what the administration wants, is absolute protection of any telecommunications company that has complied with the government request to violate your privacy and turn over all your telephone records. So they want immunity retroactively. And that to me would be like saying, well, let's hire a private gangster to go in your house and rob you, but the government tells them to do it, and therefore give them retroactive immunity. It makes no sense at all. But we have secret courts. The country has essentially endorsed torture. We have now endorsed on principle the idea that there is no sacred determination to protect habeas corpus, something that's been around since 1215, and we as a country now have begun to reject it. And it's already had some precedent setting because it hasn't always been the terrorists who have been mistreated. Of course, all those terrorists who have been mistreated and tortured were only suspects. They weren't terrorists, they were suspects. And yet today, American citizens have been held in secret prisons and hauled around the country and around the world. This is serious business, and it is a major event. It's a major event for your generation, economically and politically speaking, and something has to be done. And fortunately, we still have enough freedom left in this country to do something. The stage is set that we can respond. And there's time in this campaign to still have an impact. The campaign is not over. We will continue. Every single vote is a vote for liberty that we get. And this will not go unnoticed. If we could get a good showing in Pennsylvania, this means that others will notice it. We need to take the concept of liberty and put it back together again. A few people defend now and then civil liberties and personal privacy. Others on occasion will defend economic liberty. But they're one in the same. They're not different. You can't be a good civil libertarian and not protect property rights and economic liberty. The purpose of a free society is to release creative energy so people have the incentive to go out and work and take care of themselves, assume responsibility for themselves and their family. And then there would be great wealth. There would be less poor people, not more poor people. They say that it's selfish to believe in the free enterprise system and capitalism. But if we are driven only by humanitarian concerns about our fellow man, you have to come down on the side of liberty. Because there's only one way you can produce enough goods and services and distribute them the most fair way possible, and that is through freedom. Socialism and welfarism and authoritarianism and fascism, it doesn't work. Freedom is the only answer to the problems that man's facing. So in spite of the problems, there's every reason to be optimistic. The ability for us to reach other people and find allies, it's out there, and it is through the internet. The one thing that I have advised in this campaign that will continue is that like-minded people enjoy associating with each other. We should have fun doing this. And all of a sudden you will notice that you will be having fun with people that might have different lifestyles, because they might want to use their freedom one way and somebody else wants to use their freedom another way. It's sort of like, you know, Protestants and Catholics getting together. We don't have to fight with each other. What we have today is exactly the opposite. Because today, the control of our personal lives and the control of our economic lives is in Washington, D.C. So in order to get anything back of what they take from us, we have to go to Washington, D.C. And the lobbyists run the country. We need to change that because the economic pie is shrinking. Our productivity is going down. The revenues are going down, and all they know what to do now. They can't tax anymore. They can't borrow anymore. All they know what to do is print more money. That means an economic crisis and a further attack. But today in Washington, they're clawing away at the remaining part of a shrinking pie. And this is why the goal ought to be to expand the economic power. The economic wealth of this country can only be expanded by expanding your particular personal liberty. That's what does it. The method that they have used to collect the revenues through the taxes system and also through the inflation has to be addressed, because the inflation, the ability of governments to print when they come up short of money, is a sinister way of taxing. And the poor people are hurt the most. The people who are on fixed incomes, their cost of living always going up faster than what their benefits are going up. Or your wages. Your cost of your education always goes up much faster than your income or your parents' income, because they can't keep up. That is the nature of it. And some people suffer a lot more. Economic power and political power is gained when they have control of the money. Because if governments can control it secretly in a secret bank and subsidize the politicians who go and promise everything to everybody, whoever wants something, the politician votes for it, whether it's the military-industrial complex or food stamps for everybody, and they don't have any money and they intend to inflate, believe me, the crisis will get worse. But the good news is that we have a real opportunity to return to a sound system. We're better off than the Soviet system. They didn't have high respect and high regards or an understanding about sound money and property rights. They didn't understand how contracts work. Today, this country at least can remember. All we have to do is look at our Constitution and we'll figure out what we're supposed to do. We need to use our Constitution once again. We can restore all those great things that has made this country great. So once again, I want to thank you very much for coming out and for your enthusiasm. And let's fight this battle together. Let's restore the greatness of America. Thank you very much. Thank you.